We'll call the meeting into order and start. There's no one guest. Would you like to say anything? Or?
Give me time.
If I hear something? All right.
Trust me, you'll hear me.
Okay. All right, so then I'd take a motion to approve the minutes.
I move that we
The
approve
agenda.
the minutes and agenda as listed.
Spoon, do you have any questions on that? Minutes and agenda, okay?
No. Yep.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Did we get a second? Spoon, you seconded, right?
Okay.
Okay, good.
You got that?
Vote first, then second. That's fine.
All right. So then we should go into committee reports. Policy Council would be
David.
But maybe Deb, you want to take administrative report and a Policy Council report at the same time?
Yeah, I can do that. So if you want me to do that now?
Yes.
We do have a policy council meeting scheduled for next Wednesday. I think we have met since the last one. The monthly reports hopefully were sent to you. Those are September's.
Did you guys all get the monthly report?
Yes.
Spoon, did you get it by email, the monthly report for
Yes,
EDS?
yeah.
Okay, and so you should see October's following our policy council meeting a week from tonight. We are in the throes of our recruitment for new policy council members, and we typically see a robust, what's the word?
Interest.
Thank you. And we had several potentials visit our last meeting. Hopefully they will come back next week and be voted in. And we have a new community rep who may be interested in joining as well. So I will have the final ballot for you, for the final list at our next board meeting. I will also have for you, hopefully, our Policy Council approved application for our annual Head Start, Early Head Start refunding, as well as an opportunity to apply for dose and duration funds, which basically is money to increase Head Start programs from half-day to full-day programming. And while we do already, I think I told you about this last time, we already do provide full-day program. In theory, only half of that day is a Head Start day, so all the comprehensive supports that come along with the Head Start program are only funded for 4 hours a day rather than 7 or 7.5. So this is a way for us to actually access more funds.
The services are actually happening the whole time, but you're only getting funding for half the time that you're.
Right, so our program model, our Head Start and our Head Start program is really through a combination of what we call multifaceted funding. So we have Head Start money, and then we have state child care division money, we have Act 166, and we just kind of piecemeal it together. And this is an opportunity for us to get more money. I was hoping that it would be more money so that we could increase our teacher salaries, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen, because what is happening simultaneously is that on the state child development division side of our equation, those are what used to be called child care subsidies, and so parents need to apply, they need to be eligible, and sometimes there is a copay, and if we're not leveraging the copay, then that infringes on our ability to pull down 100% of the subsidy from the state. And the state, in its effort to spread the wealth a little more and have subsidies available to more families, has tightened up on the restrictions. It sometimes costs us because it requires work on the part of the parents to submit paperwork and that kind of thing. And we spend a lot of time tracking down and chasing down that information, so we have been hit with less money than we've seen in years past. So we really need this Head Start money to level it out. Sarah Frederickson, who is our Boston-based Head Start rep, is coming next Tuesday and Wednesday. And she has encouraged me, because this dose and duration money is nationally competitive. And there are many programs still in the country that don't operate full day. So that's really the push, is that they want Head Start programs to be full day. So we don't fall high on the list of priorities for funding. However, they are allocating monies to each region, which they don't always do. And so Sarah from our region has assured me that there will probably be funds available. So that's why I'm bringing that application to you next go around. It's due December 1st. So it will be November 28th, I think we'll meet again. And again, so Sarah's coming on Tuesday and Wednesday. She'll be meeting with Lyle and myself and Jill, hopefully. And David, hopefully, will join us either on the policy council side of things or the school board meeting. It's a routine review visit. I find it to be very supportive, so I think that's all great news. I also want to tell you that in the throes of preparing these documents, I've been comparing data. And a year ago at this time, we had 10 teacher position vacancies.
That's I was looking, I was going to ask you that.
We only have 5 right now, so that's
Positive news.
It's still sad, but it's better than it was a year ago.
And the policy council members that are coming forward, the potentials, are they all still so highly from Westminster, or are we getting some folks from down our way too?
It's still very heavy on the Westminster side, and we have a couple of folks from this community. We did that last year too, and they just kind of fizzled as the year went on. So we've seen a robust representation from Westminster now for a number of years, but we do have some Brattleboro-based representation.
Okay, so more committee reports. Energy committee's not met. Alternative governance subcommittee, I asked David, and he said until the final state rulings from the State Board of Ed on the mergers, they don't have any updates for us from their side.
And that's expected by the 30th?
Of November is the law, right?
November 30th is the one.
Do you sense, Lyle, I thought what they announced was their decision.
It said it was provisional.
It's provisional. They have to do the final vote, and they have to give the articles of agreement still.
Oh, that's true, the articles of agreement, we've only seen the proposed.
Correct.
And they haven't had a meeting where they discussed those specifically
I
yet?
did not see that. The last meeting minutes I looked at were October 29th, where they did the rest of the
Yep,
state.
rest of the state.
And then I don't remember meet again.
Well, I must be meeting sometime in November to announce
At
for
least
November
one,
30th.
and I would guess probably twice.
Okay, and finance is meeting right now.
Yeah, I
and
can tell
Lyle
you-
will be meeting with them eventually.
Yep. Last week, Finance heard about the grants, so that's always the good news, the money that comes into us. Today, Special Ed is presenting their budget. Next week, it will be WSESU-wide, so next week it'll be ELL, central office, which includes curriculum, technology, so hopefully, and actually when we get to my report, I'll give you the timeline. Or would you like it now as part of my report?
Go for it.
All right. So this is the budget timeline. You guys probably all have it, but I'll send some your way anyway. We'll just look at it after you have it. So you can see on the left are the different actions that we'll be taking. In the middle, it is the WSESU, so that's what's meeting right now. Brattleboro Town is obviously BTSD, so principals have been meeting with Frank to get started. Frank generally loads in the assumptions for staffing, staffing salaries, benefits, that type of thing, and then principals will go in and into the software and put in what they're expecting. We are hoping to have a first draft for your review. It would on the 12th. the 15th, and I'm talking December now, December
Okay.
15th, we are supposed to be getting assumptions from the Agency of Ed, as you know from the past. Doesn't always happen. Then there'll be more time after that we will discuss it, hopefully with approval on January 1st.
So our budget or our timeline doesn't include any extra meetings for us now. We are pretty much
Correct.
booked in. A long time ago, we had to come in the mornings and meet early.
Oh,
So that will be something that we'll have to decide after you get the first draft, if you want to add an extra meeting or not.
And there's one budget being prepared, or
Right now, there's, every school is preparing their own budget, as always. We're going ahead until we have something specific from the State Board of Ed. We are going on as we have always done in the past.
but even if there were a merger taking place July 1st, we could have everybody's individual budgets just
Will be
melded
merged.
for the first year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you look at the draft articles of agreement, the board chair and board clerk from every board in existence now meet a number of times, and it's the first responsibility of that transition board to get the budget together to then present to the newly elected merged board.
but they wouldn't be elected until the following March.
No, they will be elected probably in a special meeting,
Oh,
special
okay.
election.
Okay,
Because we have to have that in place before they can vote on a budget. We're looking, just Frank and me talking, we don't want to tie the hands of principals in hiring. The later that budget is approved by the electorate, the longer we put off being able to hire teachers that are needed. And the longer that's put off, the smaller the candidate pool. So we will be working on a pretty tight timeline once the state board gives us their
okay.
final go.
And my understanding is if anyone does file a lawsuit, then that could stop all of the mergers until it works its way through the court anyway.
So Frank and I had a phone conference with our attorney and just talking about the procedure, the dates, and that was a question that we asked. And the attorney said, we would move ahead unless there's an injunction, and an injunction stops everything. But if it's
What's
just
the difference between a lawsuit?
a
and an
lawsuit, apparently is different. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. So a lawsuit, it's out there. We're still working through until we're told to stop. If we're told to stop, then we call our lawyer and he'll.
injunction? What's supposed to do?
Yep.
Okay. I don't think there's anything else we can all do, but we're all going forward as we normally would. You guys are putting together budgets and keeping track of anything that's new for us, either up or down. Yeah. So that's finance and then diversity.
We just met. Normally, we don't meet till next week, but because next Wednesday is the performance showcase, we had our meeting early, and I had to leave a little bit early from the meeting to come here, but most of the meeting that we had, we were hearing from Martha Allen, who is the former Vermont NEA leader, and now she's on the task force for eradicating institutional racism, and she's the liaison to school districts about that. So this is very closely related to what we were going to talk about under unfinished business.
Okay.
Should we just meld that into one item?
Yeah, unless you just want to take it now. I've been doing that for everybody else.
Okay. So basically what she said is that they had a couple of years ago voted, the NEA, the whole nation's NEA voted that they wanted to make a goal of eradicating institutional racism, and so they did that by creating state level task forces on it. And the Vermont one is sort of, I think, one of the more like advanced along this path ones. So what they are doing is creating an online toolkit for schools, and they're hoping that it's going to be completed by the end of November or maybe December. But she gave a very lengthy and detailed explanation of what kind of the tools were, and it's the basic pieces of it are, there's an awareness piece this is mostly for administrators and staff, but there is also a student part to it. But for administrators and staff, it starts with awareness, and then education, and then action, and then there's a policy and research part. And so it sort of like gives you all of the tools you need to go through each of those steps, including stuff like and this is what she was going to send me straight away, is there's a 30-minute movie that they've made of people just talking about their experiences all over the state in schools and communities, experiencing bias and discrimination, and then what that was like for them. And then there's a bunch of resources that they link to, which has like stuff like reading lists, professional development resources, for like evaluating classroom and school environment. There's a glossary, there's book lists, there's instruction on what teachers can do when they hear something in the hallway or in their classroom that someone says, and how to handle that when a student says something to another student. There's stuff about restorative practices. There's a section for students on how to start their own racial justice alliance. And then the policy and research part is mostly for school boards and administrators, but it basically gives you templates you can use and adapt for what's relevant for your own school or school district, that draws from the Vermont School Board Association definition of equity, the language from the Ethnic Studies bill, and it has a policy, a legal policy for when people are asking you to raise a flag, that I think was developed at the necessity of some schools having that, and then being told by the lawyer, this is opening you up to some kind of legal mess if you don't make a policy. So that's in there. And there's a list of trainers that are going to be vetted by the task force or the agency of education. So the whole thing is basically so that school districts don't have to start from scratch with this, and that was somewhere that I think was kind of feeling like a roadblock for us. So there's all of this, and I was thinking it might be great once that has already been completed and is available online, if we could have her come to one of our meetings and talk about how people could use that.
So I spent Thursday and Friday at the Vermont Vision Conference, which is a diversity conference. Martha was there. Martha and I met. The people that work on leadership teams in the schools will be looking at that film with me on January 7th when we go to Landmark College with our leadership groups, and talking about how that can be used at each faculty meeting. If you've not seen it,
You mean the leadership team of you and these principal guys?
I mean the leadership. I met with Martha. We're going to be meeting as adults on January 7th, all the adults that take the student leadership teams together.
Oh, okay. So they're like the sponsors of the,
yeah.
Okay.
Counselors, sometimes principals, a teacher, whatever. We'll be looking at that film with the objective of how that film can then be brought back to each school faculty meeting, to be used at faculty meetings, discussion points, that type of thing. So, and Martha also volunteered to come down and go to any faculty meeting to review the toolkit, use the film, talk about the film. So Martha's reached out to us already. So.
Great.
So from what you're saying, that's a fairly comprehensive.
Yes, they're like, here's a kit of everything that you need, and we want to help you implement it. So they offer support as well as the online thing, which is not made yet.
So that kind of, to me, is checking off what we were looking at for
Yeah.
our board goal of making sure we were.
Yeah, and I think that what she said is sort of like the first step of it is that once staffs, schools are viewing this movie, that you're invited to sort of reflect on, like, what do we see as where do you think your school is on a spectrum of equity, and that she recommends that they have some kind of facilitated discussion. So that's also included in the toolkit as a discussion guide for the film, so that you can kind of usher the conversation in a constructive way.
So that's where we were kind of getting stuck.
Yeah.
Board.
One thing I haven't seen is a chart of diversity among the paid people in the school district. And I'm curious, does that exist?
I would suspect not. If it did, people would have to self-report if they're of a different race. I'm not going to go and
Yeah,
pick the
okay.
people that I think might be.
All right, well, people can self-report.
could
You
self-report,
can
yeah.
go about it any way you want it. But it seems odd that we so carefully check our students. And I don't know if a student does a kindergarten or a first grade kid, I guess they self-report on who they are, right?
The
As-
parent reports it.
As well, the parents do it for them. But however it happens, I think that would be revealing, because that was certainly the watershed moment on the town side of local politics, when someone said, you know, you got 139 people on your payroll, and not one was a person.
I think it is nearly as stark as that on the schools, as far as racial diversity, and then there's other, types of diversity that exists among the staff. But I think Michaela told me once she did an informal count, and she said there's about 15 people in the whole SU from every level of staff, administrators, teachers, other staff. So it's pretty low.
Pretty low.
It's pretty low, and it's definitely, it's much lower than the percentage that is reflected in the town's overall population, and which the town's overall population is much lower than the population of students in the schools. Right, so it's about 10% of the town, but about 20% of the students in the school district are listed as people of color.
I would like to motion that we task the administration to create that report, a diversity report among paid.
So we've talked that there's a lot of different kinds of diversity. So what are you thinking specifically that you want to check?
Can you help me? What would work with?
Racial diversity?
Racial? Do you think that's what's important?
Well, I'm just wondering if there are any legal considerations here about asking people
That's what I'm
stuff.
thinking.
If I'm Jewish, do I count?
Well,
If
no.
I'm Muslim,
If
do I
you're
count?
if you're looking at racial
Well, how about
diversity,
if
no,
you give
those
the
are
option
religions.
So if I'm
saying,
Asian, do I count?
Of course.
Okay.
I mean,
I just, I
mean,
don't know.
There is
how we go
defined
about this.
categories of race, but there's another question of like, do we want to study, is there religious diversity, is there gender diversity, and all of those other things? But I think maybe this could be a starting place of just, it's a federally, the census question. You can use the same question of like, are you one of these categories? Religion isn't considered in race.
So that would be people would have to self-report that, because I'm sure legally we can't mandate that someone
Right.
tell us any of this for.
I mean, you can do a survey of the staff that's optional for people to return.
So
If
that's-
it's optional to return, then we won't get an accurate response rate percentage-wise.
Well, what do you guys think would be a good way to evaluate it?
So let me just back up. That was a motion. Do you want to second it?
I will second it.
Now we can go into discussion, because I skipped the second.
Oh,
earlier
sorry,
in my
sorry.
motion.
So what do you want to do with the information?
Well, I mean, maybe we don't need to do this if everyone just agrees that it's very underrepresented in our staffs, and that it's important, very important, that we figure out how to address this. If we don't need a study to tell us to do that, then maybe we can just not
Well,
worry about
that's-
that piece of it. But what was your intentions?
My motion was to have a study written, even if it,
But I mean, for what end?
well, so that we know we can talk about racial diversity among us and know what we're talking about instead of saying, well, it seems like there's more, it seems like there's less, maybe it's growing, it's shrinking. We
But do
don't
you-
have any information.
I mean, do you feel like there's not a good consensus on this? Because I feel like even without a specific number and statistic, anyone with eyes can see, and I've heard teachers talking about it too, that it's like, we know there's a lack of diversity on the staff. And that, I think, is accepted by everyone, right?
Which suggests that
Racial diversity.
racism among the staff is there.
That's a huge
That's a
leap.
huge
No, that's not the logical conclusion of that thought. It's not necessarily the staff is racist and that's why. I mean, you made up one possible reason why, but it's definitely not a foregone conclusion.
It's not a foregone conclusion, but
I think that
if
it's
you
much
get
more productive
involved-
here to think about systemic barriers than racism on the part of the staff persons. And the systemic barriers are, you know, across our whole population, not just the school structures, okay? So there's things that hinder people from being able to become teachers. There's things that might hinder people who are teachers from getting hired. That's one piece, that thing that you're alleging to. But then there's also like the things that hinder us from attracting candidates to even apply. So there's a lot of things to address there that's not just like the staff is racist.
And I should point out that I sit on a diversity equity community-wide council that includes police, it includes the town manager, it includes BDCC, myself, talking about the fact that it can't just be the school, it can't just be the police force, it has to be all of us working together. We've set up recruitment trips into places, usually in the Northeast, because to recruit someone not in this area, to have them get here and figure out, oh, winter is pretty bad. So the advice that we've gotten on doing recruitment trips is to go to a place that has a similar climate. We've brought people in, students in from St. Joseph's in Rutland, all students of color that have spent a day in our schools with our police force, at the hospital, trying to attract people of color. We have, when we're advertising for teachers' positions and for administrator positions, we've used some suggested websites that Curtis Reed suggested to us. So there are efforts underway to attract people, but it's not just a school issue. We can't, if we want to hire people, we also have to have jobs for partners or spouses that are also likely to come here. So.
It's interesting because that came up in one of the keynote speakers at the school board conference. I think it was the first woman, the black woman from Washington, and talking about the fact that a lot of white places don't know how to go about finding a diverse staff. And what I heard her say is that one important place to go is to advertise where teachers of color are educated. And not to necessarily worry, like at Howard University, you don't need to ask, but just advertising there is saying to anybody that's reading it that we are open. And they will decide, because a lot of students go to such places from all over. There might be a New England student at Howard University.
And I think that's what Lyle's saying we are doing.
We're trying to advertise in lots of different places. Every teacher that I talk to, not just here, every teacher that I talk to, I ask them, how did you hear about the job? And they always say School Spring. That is nationally known where teachers look for jobs. School Spring has a section that you can check so that they will put that ad out into other more traditional black colleges, into periodicals or things that other minorities might look at more. than School Spring. So we could identify specific colleges and send our information there. But I feel like we're making a good faith effort to try to bring in a wide variety of candidates.
I'd like to say a little bit more. And I know this is going to arouse some emotions here. But I'm thinking of now the thought of experiment of a person of color out in the public watching this on TV and looking at this entirely white group, deciding that it really knows what it needs to know about racism, and we don't need to really get numbers down because we just know it's not as good as it should be. And having grown up in a somewhat integrated area and given the life I had, I was always someone who felt like I had pretty much overcome my racism until I got into a group that actually was, it's all, the focus was bringing out those feelings in people, in all of the people participating in the group. And the things that started to come out, because these were all people who thought that they were pretty well beyond the race issues, that they understood them and just never conceived about how much was so deeply embedded within them, much the same as how long it took me to understand, and still learning, what white privilege is. It just, I would have thought I was beyond. I knew that I was beyond. I don't do white privilege. Yeah? Well, and it's the same thing. And to me, I think there should be some amount of actual training in which some amount of staff is actually in groups that are not focused on how you teach diversity and acceptance, but in recognizing it within themselves, which actually goes much further towards enabling one to recognize it within others, and particularly kids.
Isn't that part of what the training that we just talked about is going to do?
Yes, that is in the toolkit. One of the professional development, she said, is sort of starts with recognizing your own biases, and then once that piece has come to pass, then you go on into evaluating how you can build your classroom to be more inclusive and your school to be more inclusive in the school environment. So what you're talking about is already in this toolkit. I think that the toolkit is meant to address the environment of the school, from the teachers and staff and administrators' own personal thoughts to what's in their classrooms, to what they're saying to the kids, and it's at all levels. But the one thing that it doesn't have at all is about attracting a diverse staff or maintaining one. So that, I think that you're right to bring up as a separate piece. I feel like if we all can agree that this is something that we seriously want to work on and agree is an issue, then I don't really think that there's a big value in trying to think about how to create a survey that's statistically examining that. I think it's like we're all to the end of that jumped past the measuring and seeing, yes, we have a problem and we need to do something about it, then that's sort of like wasting time on step one, when we can move on to step two of looking at some ways to bring the stuff that Lyle's talking about down to our school district level as goals, or something where we're going to decide, the micro steps that you have on working towards a goal and what we're going to do there.
So I guess we have a motion on the table. Any other discussion from anybody about the motion of actually taking a survey, and which would be self-reported, of the racial diversity of our staff? Are we ready for a vote on that?
I mean, I'm just
I don't think it's needed.
I'm just guessing by the nodding heads that I'm looking at that you guys are all like, yes, we need to do something. Is that accurate about diversifying the staff?
We don't need to do a survey.
Right.
Right, I mean, but like, we're all to the, like, we know the results of the survey, we're ready to move forward. Okay, so, okay.
We already know the results of the survey without taking it.
I mean, Spoon, you're probably the least familiar person in the room of what the teachers at the schools look like, and who they are. Now, not everyone can be perceived by looking at them, what their race is, but when you're looking at a staff of 60 people or 100 people, you know, you don't necessarily need to take a survey to tell you this is very undiverse. If we all can see that that is the result of our informal survey that we do with our eyes in the buildings, then I'm not sure what the value of saying, okay, we did the survey and the result is there's 2 people in the school district.
2?
No, she used.
I'm
that
just
as an
making that
example.
up. I'm making that up.
There are more
You're
than 2
just
people.
making it up.
If there was
There are
an
more
answer.
people. I still would like to know the purpose. What's the purpose? We all know we're trying to attract a more diverse teaching population. We know we don't have anything close to
All right.
what our students self-report.
One purpose is to be held accountable for progress in this area, so that we can say we can take a survey now and we can take a survey next year. and
Well, what
see
about
it
if we
changes.
just do a survey of new staff and measure it by who we're adding to our schools instead of looking at the whole number that's already there?
Well, I want to go back to what Lyle said about this being a community effort and not just ours. And I've shared this story many times in this format, but I teach at Springfield College on the weekends, and my students are African American and Puerto Rican. I'm the white person in the room. I have brought them here in this community, talked it up, come and see, it's a great place to live. And I had 2 African American fathers, male students, come to visit my office and spend the day with me, and they said, where's my community? Where's my church? What is there to do here? So to put the burden entirely on us, I think is really, it's not realistic, it's unreasonable, and I think that we have to reach out to people of color. We're talking about people of color. When we talk about diversity, that's a different can of worms. We have diversity, we just can't see it. We need to ask the people of color what they need to come here. Why aren't they coming? And it's a community effort. It's not just on us.
But we can do our own part of it.
Yes, we can. And I'm proposing, yes, part of it is very much what you're describing. It is about taking self-inventory, looking at your biases, and we all have implicit biases. We all do. It's human nature. And recognizing that, and certainly taking that to teach diversity in general, because the same principle applies, no matter what we're talking about. And then, you know, while we're building that strong community, we say to the people that would like to invite into the community, how can we get you here? What do you need?
I mean, I feel like we're very lucky because this is already a community-wide effort. So we do have something in place that can help with all of the other parts of it that aren't really within the school's power to affect. We have this committee that Lyle spoke of that we can partner with. We could also look at maybe connecting with racial justice orgs in town. I mean, I know that there is a group that's very specifically focused on creating a feeling of community for people of color in the Brattleboro area. And so when people come to you and say, where is my community? You could be like, well, let me put you in touch with so-and-so, and she can tell you what it's like from her perspective and what kind of resources there are. I mean, there's ways that we could kind of increase our own ability to connect together these different things that are all working on it. And I don't necessarily think Rome was built in a day, that like maybe the goal isn't going to be like by 2020 we're going to have the same ratio of staff of color as we have students of color, but maybe we can make goals like let's see if we can get someone to apply for a job, or let's do these 10 things that we think will lead towards that, and then at least we can say, well, we did the goal, we said we were gonna do those things, whether we can't affect other people's actions exactly, but we can do everything that we can to elicit the response or reaction that we're hoping for.
I do want to say I get defensive, Spoon, when you speak, because I feel like you think there's nothing happening, and there is stuff happening. The WSESU board voted to increase so that we have another diversity equity person that works just at the elementary level. Yesterday I met with all the outlying town principals, and they are starting to talk about how do we include more Black history into all of our history curriculum. So there are things happening everywhere. So I apologize for being defensive, but I feel like you're saying that we aren't doing anything.
I'd
I
like
don't
to
think
hear,
you should apologize. I mean, loaded comments like that, Spoon, do nothing but put up walls.
All right, I know it, I am less than tactful, but I got a lot of experience. And all I actually suggested is that we do a survey to see what the facts were. I didn't make any particular, I just said normally, most everywhere you go, that sort of thing like employment is a very strong indicator. So I just said, let's just see where we stand. Now, Robin, off the top of her head, said 2.
I made that up. That was just
She
a
made
random
it up.
number. I was not trying to
All
count
right,
people.
so
I don't know
maybe
who
it's
works
3.
in any
I
of the
don't know.
schools
Out
as a
of the
whole.
whole paid staff. I got a hunch, though, you have a sense. You didn't choose 20, you didn't choose 30, you chose 2 as your example. Because I think what you were saying, not that it was exactly 2, but that it was an extremely low number. And how low? 2, in fact, 3?
But what's the difference if it was 2 or if it was 10? That doesn't really change what we need to do next. So that's why I'm saying, even though I seconded this motion, I think that we can just move forward with actions instead of stopping to do a measuring piece.
And how will we measure the results of our actions?
By new hires. And also by just like, did we take steps? You know, making
So we'll
goals.
report out our new hires?
Well,
Is that what?
Every new hire we do. Every new hire gets presented to the school board.
I never read anything about their color on their
We're not allowed
sheet.
to ask.
I don't know who gets hired other than a name.
And
So-
we always advertise with the statement that all people are encouraged to apply, and it has more language than that, but it has, people of different colors, genders, basically that we don't discriminate.
I mean, there is an issue here of, you're right. I mean, how can we measure it if it is illegal to ask the people the answer to the question? That does present sort of a problem. But there must be a way that people do this. I mean, what are they doing on the town side to measure whether they're being successful at their efforts? If David was here, we could ask him the answer to
And
that.
David sits on that same committee
Yeah.
as I do,
That has,
the diverse workforce.
yes, okay.
so there's a motion on the floor. It's been on the floor for a little while, actually. So we should vote. Spoon, you're going to vote in favor of your motion, I'm
Yes,
guessing?
I am.
Robin?
No, I'm not voting that we should do the survey.
I'm going to vote no because I think it's illegal and we won't get much value from it. But I do see Spoon's point of without having some sort of data, it's hard to know when we're making improvements. So with that in mind, I'd like us to keep that thought that Spoon's raising, that we have to have some knowledge of where we are in order to look to go forward. Another couple thoughts that I have, we talked about diversity a lot in this group here in the last year. This one is just racial diversity. And I thought we were looking at diversity in general all the time, and so I think personally that there's a lot more going on than what we hear as a board. So I'd like to ask the administrators, asking, not making motions, I guess, into anything formal, ask you all to tell us more, make it a point maybe in your monthly reports to try to find something that illustrates some of the diversity training that's going on. I mean, off the top of my head, I'm just sitting here thinking of the Diversity Day that you didn't even mention in the report, so maybe it's not that big of a
Well,
deal.
it is a big deal, but it's not
outside
until
of-
May.
Well, there was one at the high school.
Next Wednesday.
Oh, well, but I mean, were the grade schools involved in that?
Yeah. I have
So-
performers.
So that would be the.
I had to leave early from the meeting, so that might have been something they
So
discussed.
anyway, I'm thinking that those are the types of things that would be good for the board to hear, for the townspeople that apparently watch these incredibly enthusiastic videos. And so, because I personally was part of the Diversity Day over at the high school with the PACS exchange students, and all the stuff that I saw going on in the high school on Friday was really great. And I'd love for people to hear what's going on in the grade schools. I also think back to exactly what's going on, when we talk about, you said, getting Black History Month and Black history to be included in all of history, and looking at that, I look at our 1% application, I think there was something in one of them about that as well, if I'm not mistaken. But, I look at it as a parent and think of what was going on this year at the middle school in the history class, when my daughter's information's being presented to her, and they had us as parents look at two different texts about Christopher Columbus arriving, and one is the paragraph of how he arrives and discovers the whole new world, and yay, team, go forth. And the second one is how Christopher Columbus arrives and immediately enslaves people and leads to the establishment of the slave trade. So, two completely different sources, two completely different texts to show the kids at the middle school level to be thinking critically. That's what I think when we're talking about diversity that we want the kids to be doing. Those are the types of things that I guess I'm asking you administrators to tell us what else is going on in your schools that's like that. And I imagine first graders are not going to hear the same thing as eighth graders. So obviously it's different stuff. And one last point that comes to mind as I'm sitting here listening to this, that part of the reason that our town has, in our town schools, we have a little bit more diversity, which is great, is because some of us who live here have brought in that diversity in different ways. And I think that to always say, well, our teaching staff, if we look at our teaching staff, are we diverse males and females?
No.
Not at all. We're hugely heavy on the female side. And so that too, when people say, well, they should have a role model, the boys that are in class should be able to look up and see that too, to me, is something of a concern if we're going to be looking at all of this. So I hear you, Spoon, because if we don't have any measurements, it's harder to know where we started and when we make some sort of progress here. And I think there is stuff moving us forward.
Well, let's all think about that, about how we might go about evaluating and measuring success at this school.
And maybe it's not success at the goal, or steps, like you said, steps towards the goal, that we are actually making movement. Because in the end, we can't make someone move here. And statistically, we live in a predominantly non-diverse area, I mean, that racially.
Yeah, but that's not reflected in the schools even. The amount of diversity in Brattleboro is much greater than what is in the staff. So even if we were just like, let's make our goal that we are equitable with the adult population of the town.
Part of the reason that happens is because those of us who live here have children of mixed races, or have children that we've adopted, or we have foster children.
That's some of it, but there is still a lot of adults of color in the community. It's not all children.
Exactly so, but I think that's a large part of it. But statistically, I don't know that. I mean, that's from my anecdotal experience.
Well, I'm just going on census data, not on anecdotal, but it is.
Census data of the kids of color in our school, or of mixed race?
Of the total population of the town, the total population of Brattleboro, demographic breakdown.
Of the town?
Yeah.
Not of the kids in the school?
Well, I know both of the numbers approximately, and the schools are about 10%, the town is about 10%, and the staff of the schools is much lower than 10%. I don't know what the exact number is, but I can
So
tell it's
my
not
point is
10%.
that I think that part of the reason that it's high in the schools is because there's a lot of people that have brought children in.
Right, right, but even if we're gonna say, okay, maybe we don't have the adult population to sustain a 20% reflection of the students, we could at least aim for the population of the town being reflected in the school. Not the number of kids in the school, but the people who live in Brattleboro. Which there are many adults of color.
So we can aim for that, but again, I guess I go back to the same point that we can't, why I'd like us to try to actually measure our goals by steps that we're taking, because we can't force that number to increase. We can do everything possible, which I think we're doing.
I think it's worth thinking about. I don't think that we're doing everything possible. I think we're doing a lot of good stuff, and that we can think creatively about how we could go deeper and maybe, you know, think about what could be measurable goals of this that would be reasonable.
So I guess
If we're doing everything we can, then the answer to that is do nothing more. I don't think anyone here thinks that we're at the do nothing more stage.
Okay, so I'll take back
Maybe I'm
everything
wrong.
we can, but I think we are doing a lot of things already to try to encourage people to apply. We certainly give them, I mean, I don't think we're having people apply and saying, oh, we're not gonna hire this person because they're of color.
We're not getting people applying.
Yeah, that's the goal here, is to get people to apply.
And I guess that's where I come back to, we can't force someone to apply.
We're not talking about make a goal forcing people.
But how do you reach and achieve a goal when the goal is dependent upon somebody else's action?
The other thing is, when we get a list of applicants, there's nothing on that application that indicates that the person is a person of color. I've sat in on Skype interviews with Mark where we have reached out to other places that I would consider Mississippi, Louisiana. We had Skype interviews thinking, okay, maybe this will be a person of color, we can bring them here, and they then invite people. So even when we're trying to reach out to places where I would consider a greater percentage of the person being a person of color, we're not getting.
Yes. Well, I feel like we are doing stuff already. It's obvious that we are not doing nothing. We're doing a lot of stuff. But the fact that none of the stuff has resulted in applicants of color is what makes me say, okay, well, what else can we do? And that might be, let's partner in a more deep way with other organizations in the town, not just let's take this all onto our own backs, like Deb was saying, that seems like an unreasonable burden for Head Start to try and do by themselves, or even the school district.
We're also just having trouble finding qualified candidates, period.
Yes.
We have a handful of special ed positions that have still not been filled. So that speaks to another bigger issue about
Yes.
teacher prep programs and you know, the types of people coming out of those programs are predominantly white females.
I mean, I don't have ideas right now to say, well, everyone, here's what we're going to do. But I just think that we can keep on thinking about this and, you know, maybe from meeting with Martha or some of the people that she has a list of that might have some more ideas about like, what are some things that we haven't tried yet that might help with this? Because there's one goal, which is we got to hire enough people that are good to staff our schools. That's one thing. And then there's a whole separate thing of we need to find a way to attract a more diverse staff so that our students are seeing themselves and people that are different from them represented in the classroom and in the building. And it's hard not to tie that into the same thing because it's the same work that you as a principal are doing. I need to hire a teacher. But there's a whole bunch of other work that goes before I made a job listing and then I selected the resumes, which is, you can't, once at that point, I'm sure that none of you are saying like, well, don't call him, he has a whatever, okay? It's all of the like before stuff of like, well, what else could we do to attract people? And I know that there's been people, like Deb said, that came, looked, and were like, nah. So there's something to solve. I mean, we can't solve that on our own, but we can think about how we could look for help in solving it or what could we do as our part of that.
Yeah, and I understand.
I mean, I think one thing is like when people come to a building and look around and see how represented am I here, maybe not in the other staff members, but what else is there going on that's sending me signals that this is really valued here. And one of the things is the listing that you mentioned, Kelly, the language in the job listings, right? That's one thing. And then we could think about like, okay, what else? What else is there that we can make this the most welcoming possible environment so that when people do come, maybe they're not coming in as a job applicant, maybe they're coming in as a parent and their cousin lives in New York and is looking for a job. You know what I mean? The word of mouth element of it, making it widely known and understood that this is a welcoming and good place to be for all kinds of people.
So
These
this,
conversations, I just will say, do give me a feeling of like guilt. I mean, we work really hard at our jobs and do the best we can to hire the best people. And right now we're set up where it's really difficult to even get a candidate of color. I can't think of one that I have the last 5 years. I totally understand the importance of having a staff that reflects your community. Absolutely, I understand that and would love to have that. But to have this feeling of like being pointed at, like you guys aren't doing this because your whole school is white females with a couple of males, that's tough to hear because it feels like a really,
condemnation.
yeah.
Well, I just want to say, and Jill and I had talked about this over the phone, that I'm not bringing any of this up as a condemnation. I really appreciate the work that the schools are doing on this, and I think that it's completely natural to the point of like maybe inevitable that at some point in your reckoning with these sorts of topics as a white person, that you're going to have feelings come up of guilt. And that is an unhelpful feeling. I think that if you look at this, this is a problem of our town, this is a problem of our state, very much, and this is a problem of our whole country. We are people working within that whole system.
Education.
Yeah, yes, and down to every level, there's a problem. So am I looking at the individual people in this room and saying, you caused this, you didn't put enough pictures on the wall that were diverse? I mean, no, we are cogs in the machine of this. But instead of feeling, I don't want it to seem like this is a, you know, report card, F on diverse teachers. It's more like, okay, we're in this state and in this country and system that has created a situation such as this. We have welcoming people who want a more diverse school, and we don't have one yet. So what can we do? What is there more that we can do? It doesn't mean that everything that you did up until now was creating this. We just are in it. And we got to figure out a way to rise above the rest of the way things have been so far. That's where I'm trying to go with this. I know that I bring the topic up a lot, and I just want to make clear that it is not because I feel like the Brattleboro schools are failing to be equitable. I mean, I'm sure that there are some ways that we have room to grow, of course, you know, but that's where I would like to think of it as room to grow, not as like criticism. I mean, I think we have a really amazing chance by the community that we live in that we could be a progressive leader in this and show the rest of the SU and the rest of the county and the rest of the state and country what does it look like to work really hard at this. And we're lucky that to have all of these resources that have already been created, that's like a really good jumping off place. And I think that the answer of diversifying the staff is going to be a much harder one. But I think that if people come into our schools and see all this stuff going on, that's going to be one, if we can get them to come in, that's going to be one big attractor of like, okay, I see this school really is walking the walk in a way that I haven't seen anywhere else. And maybe that's the reason that people would be attracted to apply here over a more good weather place or whatever, you know.
My point is that, and I'm right with you on all that, I think you're right on target there, but it's not up to us to judge ourselves on whether we're walking the walk. That's for the community to be able to see what we're doing and make that judgment. Because we, as the group, a board and administrators, whatever, the school community, we have a self-interest in feeling good about what we do. And so that'll be the tendency to always look at our work as successfully or something or other and trying to convince ourselves that we're doing a good job. And we do have to analyze. You need a lot of self-analysis. But at the same time, and I think most importantly, the community itself has to feel like the schools are doing what they should be doing, what they need to be doing, and that many a parent would say that if asked.
So I've let this conversation go on for quite a bit longer than what I think we all thought we were going to spend on it, and I know Lyle's going to get called out of here at some point sooner than later. But we've spent a lot of time on diversity in this last year or so as part of our goal. So I kind of wanted to let this conversation move through and say some things that people seem to be ready to be
I
saying.
appreciate that, Jill. We got a lot of good stuff out.
So at this point, I think I'm ready to move it on.
I mean, if you mean move on in the meeting, I'm with you on that. I don't think this is like diversity discussion, check, done for the year. I think this is something that we'll be revisiting, but I think that we can move on into tonight's agenda.
I'm going to come back to the one thing I'd like the administrators to point out to us on a regular basis, that there's several pieces to me about diversity. One is obviously the training that we got for ourselves, so there's that level. And then there's the actual actions that we're trying to move on it. But to me, in the actions, there's one that's a diverse workforce in a non-diverse town, and the challenge that we're talking about tonight. And then there's the other one that I feel like is more attainable or more under our purview, which is what we're doing with the education of our children under diversity. And so I'd love to hear on a regular basis and come back to this topic from that viewpoint of what are we doing? What can we hold up as maybe this is even something more that we want to do? But I want to hear about the successes that are going on and the efforts that we are making, because we've talked about that, and we've all, I think, one point that we have no disagreement on is how important it is from a young age of being able to model that and to show that in our schools. So I think we'll come back to it from several points.
Yeah, and this toolkit isn't going to be available probably until December or January, so that's something that maybe we could revisit then once it's actually available and see if people felt like that was something they could start incorporating into their meetings and
But you have it scheduled in early January already?
Martha Allen is going to send me the link to the video portion.
But you had it scheduled for your leadership group in January 8th or something?
January
you said?
something.
Yeah. So Kelsey, maybe we could put that in the minutes to come back and check in after the leadership and hear back from you, Lyle, and probably the second meeting in January, not looking at calendar. Okay, so we were actually on committee reports, and then we jumped ahead to unfinished business. So there's an other under unfinished business. I don't have any other. Anybody else? So I'm going to check unfinished business. And there's an other under committee reports. I don't think we have any. At this point, we have an hour. We have administrative reports and new business. And since Lyle is here, I want to jump into your administrative report, and then under new business, anything that we need you for before we go into any other administrative reports. Is that all right with everybody? Just to move it. All right.
So most of my administrative report has been given because it was finances and my report out on the Vermont Vision Conference that I was at Thursday, Friday last week, where I did meet Martha Allen and many other people, organizations, the Vermont Transportation, from Vermont State Police, Brattleboro police department coming together, working with Curtis Reed, some other people of color, and many, of course, white folks, and different breakout groups to talk about lots of different topics that we're struggling with throughout the state around bringing in more people of color, making Vermont a welcome place for people of color. And there was a white privilege session, there was an education session, so lots of different sessions that was very, very good. Everyone, at least I shouldn't say everyone, I would guess though that everyone goes away really feeling like they've learned a lot, gotten a lot out of it, and set some action steps. So some of the action steps for me have been looking how to go out to more colleges that have possibly Springfield. I should check in with Deb to do some more recruiting with the town police and the town manager. Other things of talking about possibly some teacher leaders, or can we identify teachers in every school so that we have people that are really keeping their eye on the whole diversity lens. So lots going on with that. That's it for me.
So under the new business, I think State Board of Education update, you've kind of...
So, yeah, I kind of did. Frank and I, as I said, put together a draft timeline. There are, in the draft articles of agreement, there are very specific days. Once the state board makes their decision, within 60 days, there has to be a meeting. Within a few days after that, so there are very specific dates that will have to be followed. Frank put together a timeline. We looked at it. We sent it to our attorney to see if he thinks that our dates are correct. There's always the 40-30 for warning meetings, that type of thing. So he looked at that. At this point, it's, as we said, the state board had a provisional vote. They will have to, I assume, make that vote a firm vote. And they still have to give us the articles of agreement, which tell us how everything will run. So that's still to come, and as Robin said earlier, it's November 30th that has to be done by. So once that comes out, we will be ready to hit the ground running, and there will be meetings. As I said, the transitional board is the board chair and the clerk from every board, including the BUHS number 6 board.
But not her.
Correct. Vernon, from all indications, Vernon will not be included in WSESU. They will either be on their own or possibly put with another supervisory union that has choice for students in 7 through 12.
And has there been any other thought of whether Vernon can actually contract with their supervisory union for anything?
We talked about that a little bit from the attorney's reading of things and legislation. Vernon cannot contract with us. They will have to be their own entity or with another supervisory union. Likely Wyndham Central, because Wyndham Central has K-6 schools that have 7-12 choice. So that's the state board update. We have round 2 of the 1%. You should have gotten all of those.
They're emailed out to everybody? You've got those already and looked through them?
Yeah.
I don't know if
So-
principals want to say anything, or if any of you have any questions about
I didn't have any
this.
questions on any of this. I looked at them. Did
Do
you?
we need to sign these?
Yes.
I do,
You'll need to
right?
approve them, and then...
Okay, just.
Oh, no, all of us do.
Yes,
Chairman,
all of
clerk,
them.
and member, so all 3 of us tonight.
Okay, and I don't think we signed the warrants either.
And-
No, but I was going to sign at the end, because
Okay.
I can't handle too many
Okay.
things.
Okay.
Okay.
Although if you want to be signing away, I guess you guys could. So,
And-
well, we have to actually make a motion to approve these 1%,
Okay.
yeah?
Go ahead.
So I'm going to make a motion to approve 1%, somebody second. And then is there any more discussion? All in favor? That was quite quickly. I know, I asked David today because he often has questions and he said he didn't on those, so congratulations, I guess the staff must be writing them very clearly. And as always, I'm sure David would say, but we always love to hear back from anything that's going on in those. that's really relevant.
I just wanted to say I was really interested in the thing that Tracy Benet-Parent is doing of community mentors for the kids. And I emailed her just to say like, that seems exciting. And she mentioned that it was motivated because of the loss of funding for the Boys and Girls Club. And so they're trying to
Find another way.
Yeah, to bring some of that mentorship that is a loss from that program into the school. So that was really neat.
Along with that, there are a couple of summaries of 1% from earlier requests, if you just want to.
Whether we can read this or ones that's.
Yeah.
Okay, so just as a report following up on. Yeah.
Okay, and they're done. And you have publicly funded pre-K, you have 2 more partner agreements, one for Sunny Lane Daycare and one for Neighborhood Schoolhouse. And the Neighborhood Schoolhouse, Jill, you'll
I was
notice.
gonna say, the Sunny Lane, I've never heard of it, it's in Brookline.
Yeah.
Why
So-
are we,
You must have a student, or at least one student from Brattleboro that is sending their child to this pre-K.
oh, pre-K, okay.
And Neighborhood Schoolhouse. And
So
apologize.
leave all of these for signing. Okay, so, and then Lyle, if you want to just say you're going into this.
I'm going to the WSESU Finance Committee to negotiate a new contract.
So that, remember, we had that discussion briefly, that we were kind of on a timeline that we did the evaluation and at the supervisory union level, and that we could, if we wish, but nobody's said that they wish to have another executive session with Lyle to give any other feedback from ourselves. I think we kind of did it quickly anyway in public. And then, as part of the contract, she needs to have an actual contract, or as part of the.
Oh, this is for your own contract?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's been left with the finance committee, just so
And it
we're all
needs-
clear on what it is.
To be done by December 31st, or you need to put it out to bid and.
Interview again. I think we just did that. So,
All right, have a good night.
all right.
Mark, stay safe.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, so
Oh,
that,
I just realized I meant to mention this, I'm not sure in the operation of our rules here where this would go. It's not on the agenda, but I just wanted to give a clarification about the gun discussion that we had last time. When was it?
let's do it now. I'm into this
Okay.
whole throwing up the agenda.
Sorry.
I'm giving up today.
I'm not.
I'm sorry.
Kelsey.
Kelsey. Well,
Sorry, Kelsey.
Well, this is an other under unfinished. We're moving
Okay.
back up.
All right. I just felt like after our last discussion, there was some question as to like, how are we doing this 1,000 feet thing? From talking with Lyle and her conferring with the lawyer, it is current federal law that you cannot fire a weapon or bring a loaded weapon within 1,000 feet of the school. So that wasn't, we weren't coming up with the 1,000 feet thing. It was the policy of saying, do not bring a weapon. So just adding that element from the current federal law that says, don't bring a loaded weapon or shoot your weapon. So it wasn't as much of a big reach as it seemed like from our previous discussion.
Good to know. All right, so then, I guess we'll finish new business, Kelsey, I'm sorry. Work plan review, and this was mostly because of David and just I wanted to make sure well, no, we did that last time. So I guess we could just look at it and see if anything changed.
Well, I had
That was why.
I made a recommendation.
That
Oh,
was
yeah.
it. Thank you.
So we didn't have to do it the day after school starts.
So if we do the work plan review, if we do what we have on now, which is Green Street on December 19th. So I'm going to back up. Today was just supposed to be administrative reports, nothing specific on it. And then the next meeting, the week after Thanksgiving, is budget updates, staff, materials, teacher leaders. So I guess at that point you'll be telling us about anything you're changing or seems different substantially in one way or the other. And then you were also going to tell us about your teacher leaders specifically, because we'd asked how many you had and how that's paid, all that.
On the 28th?
On the
We're gonna do that?
28th,
Okay.
right, so the next meeting after this. December 5th, We have administrative reports, parent climate reports, continuous improvement plans with the integrated field review, looking at that. And then the 19th is the Green Street focus. And then January 2nd is administrative reports with the social workers helping families and individuals becoming independent, progress on early interventions and educational support services. And then the 16th is Oak Grove focus, if we switch things. That would mean
That's
that
with it already accommodating Jerry's request.
Jerry's request. But the question would be whether the social workers are going to feel okay about January 2nd and helping families and individuals become independent, etc. I kind of feel like we heard quite a bit from the social workers at the academy one.
Well, that was just the academy.
Exactly.
Worker, so.
But we could try to not worry the social workers on January 2nd if we specifically ask the social worker in the Green Street focus to address that in the December 19th meeting. And then you don't have a social worker, but you could still have your counselor.
So tie it into the December 19th.
Yeah.
Does that work, Mark?
I think we can make that work. Yeah.
I
And
mean,
then-
is there anything that we're missing out on that's like cross-school work between them, or is it pretty much like they're each supporting each other but mainly doing their own work at their own schools?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the two.
Yeah, they have similar initiatives and they talk a lot. And they collaborate on things like the backpack food program and those larger community-based and agency communication, but
So they could draw attention to that at the Green Street one and
Yeah.
make sure that's clear.
between the two nights, you'll probably hear it all.
I think the January 2nd one too that just came out was progress on early interventions and educational support services. Like, how do we track that? How do we know? And how do we look at that? And again, I think you touched on that. Well, you gave really good anecdotal stuff. That was case studies. It was really easy to get our minds around. Those were really good. Also, just mentioning, Kim reminded me of this. Last year for town meeting, we asked BCTV to do something that I think was fairly well received by the town meeting reps, of identifying little clips from different meetings and pulling them together into something. And so Kim had made a note of some of the stuff that came out of both of the meetings so far that have happened, and I think continue to do that. We're looking for like 5 to 7 minutes total, 10 minutes total that people could look at. So we probably will have to have a motion at some point to officially spend the money to do that with BCTV, but it wasn't a huge expenditure. Okay, so we're good with the work plan, everybody? Moving that? So then you don't have to do it on January 2nd? All right, then.
So did you adjust that, taking the social work off January 2nd?
No, because I thought I'd leave it on until we get done with the December meeting, in case,
Okay, in case we need more.
I mean, we can look at it, because at the end of the December 19th meeting, we'd look at January 2nd's agenda
Okay.
anyway. So
Okay.
if you all help me to remind me that, but.
The only thing about that is just to be courteous to our social workers, like if you want them to come back and they would want to prepare ahead of time,
Mm-hmm.
like they would only have winter break to prepare. So it'd be helpful if we knew now.
So
I
let's,
feel like we can just say, we'll hear
No,
enough,
from
between what we
social
already
workers.
heard at the academy meeting and what I expect we'll hear at this Green Street one, I feel like comfortable saying, we will know.
so we'll still want progress on early interventions, and that's kind of on you guys in general, on January 2nd. But, I mean, I think you've already given it to us from Academy. You gave us some really
Well, I think
clear
the thing that we, if I'm remembering right, what that item was about was if there was a sort of data version of that instead of student
anecdotal.
by student.
Right, there's that conversation about academic support teachers and how do students qualify for tier 2 support.
Right, and were less people needing it as the grades went
I
down?
think it was the conversation from the budget perspective too, to be able to say at town meeting, we're investing in a lot of early interventions and educational support. We have the academic support teachers, we have the social workers, we have all of this. There's these chunk of salaries, but we also know that our XYZ has decreased. For
Right,
example,
or-
out of district placements, which cost us this much that many years ago, they're costing us this much now.
I wish Lyle was here to ask, because I think one of the other things we had mentioned was like, I wonder if this is reflected at all in if you look at how many students who came from Brattleboro town schools at BAMS need support and how many, or if that number is lower than what it is at our schools, then that would seem to indicate that like we're giving them what they need at this end and then they can be affording the successful in the
Sometimes we
next
can
level.
show, sometimes we can show that even within our own schools.
Right.
The amount of support that a K-1, 2 student's getting versus, you know, following him into 4th, 5th grade, and how it's decreasing the level of.
That would be what we want.
Like social, behavioral supports oftentimes.
That's perfect. That's what we want to see then in January 2nd.
And we'd like to see it actually at EES. We're wondering if there's a way that we could track the children in that program.
Is that
in the schools.
something that's currently kept track of at the town schools of kids who came, what preschool environment they came from?
There's no tracking, is there?
But maybe that's something that, would it
I think
be very
there's a-
hard to start keeping track of?
I think there's a question like, did you do preschool? And that's about it, right?
Well, I feel like it had more of like, what preschool did you go to on all of those forms that you fill out when
Yeah,
your kid
that.
starts?
We know what preschool, if they went to preschool.
But that's it. I mean, there's no
But if-
cohort.
So it usually
If
comes
we
up
know
in-
that they went to one of the EES schools, then we could separate out those kids and see, is the support needed at a lower level than what it is when they're at the nursery school to know
I'm
if
sure
they.
someone's going to say
built those
statistically
skills.
this is not
Yeah,
secure,
I
right?
don't think so. But what is secure is we do kindergarten readiness assessments in the beginning of the year. Brian Bittner conducts those, and it's pretty telling.
Okay,
Okay.
so maybe you get that for January 2nd?
Okay.
Do we need to ask Brian to come?
I can reach out to Brian. Yeah.
Maybe he's the one that can talk from that perspective. And maybe is there somebody maybe at the middle school level that would be able to say anything about what we're sending? No? Maybe?
And is there a way to track children who are in our Head Start program all the way through high school?
No, that, we've asked about that because that was part of what came up during the merger of, you know, being able to say, well, we put in all this investment in the Brattleboro town schools in comparison, so we think it's making a big difference, but can we say, well, they graduated, you know, at a higher percentage or something? We can't. And then the other argument or question comes up of, is that even, you know, there's so many influential factors. Is that
But I
even-
think, are you saying, when you say we can't, do you mean it's not currently being measured or it's somehow
No, I'd say
against
we
the
can't,
law
we
for
are.
us to look at it?
If I said can't, I mean we aren't. So she asked, can we track? We've asked no for that data, and no, it's not there, so we can't.
It's not there yet,
we
but we
can't
could
track.
say, let's start
Right.
keeping a spreadsheet on that and see.
Because, you know, when you think about the population of Head Start, if we have, you know, if we have children who actually graduate from high school, that's success. And so there are different markers or different accomplishments that we can track and measure. And we provide intensive supports at AES. Intensive.
Cassie, can we put that on the agenda for another time, or ask Lyle to come back to that? Because I think that's a larger thing we've talked around several
Yeah,
times.
just starting to keep data across the different school experiences, I think is maybe something that hasn't been done before, but I know even Spoon has asked about this, you know,
David's
looking
asked
at what
about it.
happens when they graduate from high school, well, we don't know yet, but if we start looking at that now, then in a few years, we could say, okay, here's the thread.
Well, I think in order to do, to make the leap to the middle school, we're going to take 3 town schools and we want to compile our data together as opposed to,
Yeah.
oftentimes we present independently. And then to compile that data together and then to look at what we're, the
So over the
cohorts
years
that we're
that-
sending up to BAMS and what are the needs that.
Over the years, my experience on the board has been that a lot of times the data is in the aggregate when we compare ourselves to the other schools, like in the supervisory union. And then sometimes that's not quite fair, because there may be something specific that's going on in one school that needed to be corrected, and the other 2 schools were doing really well, or vice versa. I mean, the other places, like Guilford's one school, you know, Putney. So I feel like whenever we put them in the aggregate, I want to be cautious as well, because there's this privacy issue that I understand, and there's the statistical validity, but then sometimes I feel like we mask what, we have 3 schools that are largely aligned. I'm going to go out on a limb and say hugely more aligned than they were when I first came on the board, hugely more. But sometimes I think it's good to still keep them separate, to be able to look and say, well, this is, like the PBS is not done yet. I've heard you talk about it maybe being something at Academy. So is there a difference in the behavioral?
I mean, just to be clear, I feel like the value of this is not necessarily going to be comparing the students who went to one school with the students who went to another school and seeing how they all do in middle school, but looking at, if we look at the Brattleboro students, say, if you wanted to break it down to one school, how many Academy school students needed behavioral supports? Or were, however you measure, I don't know if there's an at grade level for behavior, but like, that, and then at grade level. How many were reading at grade level this year? And then how many who went to Green Street School by 8th grade were doing it? You know what I'm saying? We're measuring the school against its own cohort. How did they do as they grew? Not looking at which school did the best. You know what I'm saying?
And I
guess we could look at which school did the best at growth, but it's not measuring like which school is better at reading,
I like to look
the
at
long term.
the longitudinal data for the same child throughout the time in Green Street. So we've had this child all those years, and he came in kindergarten, he needed all these different supports, but by the time he left there, and then I guess somehow compare that to the graduation rates of those kids that got that sort of support over the last few years. And I think maybe you look at that over the last 6-7 years or something. I don't know. And I think this is why we have to have Lyle here. I know David's been asking for this sort of stuff for a long time, and there's various reasons why it's not that easy to get, or legal, or statistically reliable, or whatever. So I think we need to come back to it.
You'd have to consider our transient population too,
Yeah.
because
You're a third.
you'd have to separate and only take kids who had been at our schools K-6.
And Jen
for it to be accurate.
Hemingway had that once, right before you came on. She had some, as she was leaving, she was looking and saying, I've seen these kids for 4 years, and so those are the only kids that I can actually say, I know they were with us all of this time. And she had some really fascinating ones. I know Andy pulled it out at one point too. But again, whether they're statistically valid, I don't know. Anyway, so we should talk about it again. Moving on to the agenda that we throw all the way. So 1% work plan, we're on the VSBA annual meeting report from Spoon. And just what I want to say, we have 15 minutes left. So we have that Spoon, discussion of how to further publicize what's discussed at school meeting for community participation. Pre-K partnership agreement we did. Other potential, good. So really it's only those 2, and then just look at the agenda. Because I have a band concert for my daughter, I'd love to leave, but
Okay, well, I will try to go as fast as I can.
We can
so,
push D to the next
nobody
agenda
will
if we run out
remember
of time.
anything that I say. One is, the first thing was, I feel that all of you other school board members, we are still around next year, should go to these VSBA conferences. They're, last year was so-so, that was my first. This year was quite a bit different, and I assume because I think the culture there is changing, and my hunch is it's because of the huge device or strife over the merger stuff and the positions that the mode of thinking up there took on it, and then the consequent change in the membership of that organization, and et cetera, but this year, the 2 keynote speakers were very, very stimulating. One was this woman, a black woman from Washington. I wish they gave their lecture notes so I could remember it, but
you should sell a book.
But I always remember, what I remember was her very last line in which he said, we need to be able to work together and not be concerned about winning. And when she said that word winning, it characterizes so much of our culture. And I won't go into that, but except to say we associate happiness with winning. And you're supposed to be unhappy if you lose. And then the next night, the keynote speaker was this guy, Paul Reveille, was, if you want to hear a mouthful, the Francis Keppel Professor of Practice of Educational Policy and Administration at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. So if you need a title, there's
What about the title of the other person you mentioned?
Yeah, she didn't have a title. It just is a catalyst and architect for equity. No degrees or particular offices. So, but I guess Paul Revel was considered the grand poobah. In any case, his lecture was very, very stimulating. He had an extraordinary wealth and a diverse collection of charts, graphs, et cetera, all saying that, and we know this, about how poverty affects children and learning. But what he was also saying is that after his lifetime of work and research, that is the way it is. It is not going to change. What we are doing essentially in our schools is trying to stomp out the little fires around the main conflagration, which is poverty, which keeps spawning the increasing numbers of children with problems, and as long as the poverty is there, those problems and those kids will be there, and the deeper the problems get, the more kids and the deeper the problems of the kids. So, which all suggests that if this problem is ever going to be attacked or approached, it has to be in some way the schools themselves dealing with poverty. And I think that's possible. But I don't want to go into it here. But it's all part, it was just a very, very, very stimulating a talk that he gave. And the last thing that I wanted to mention, and I found this very encouraging in a workshop. There was one workshop on the who, what, and why of school-based councils, and I stole a couple. I thought I did a couple of her copies. I didn't bring them. Anyway, after listening, this was Nicole Mace. She's the woman, the director of VSBA. And after listening to her, I got a very definite sense that if and when this merger occurs and it actually begins to go into practice and the details of how things will work will be set up, that leadership councils can be a very effective part of a school system. But it's only going to happen that way if it is very deliberately set up and focused and aided by the school boards and administrations. In other words, by how we structure them will determine how effective they are. If we provide a good structure for them to be involved, a useful structure, they can be very effective. If not, we'll be seeing very few of our parents.
And did he give examples of like what are the useful ways to structure it?
Well, yeah, there's a whole lot of, she talks about their authority and best practices. There's about 8 slides on that, and then there's an example.
So it was that was the whole thing, was the details of what the structure is.
Yeah, and then she went into, that's why I felt like after listening to her describe some of the things that you can do, then I realized that if you're willing to do them and you want to make those councils effective, you can.
Is that available online, that slideshow thing?
You know,
Because that would be good for us to look at before we talk about forming the leadership councils for
Which
schools here.
reminds me that we didn't have it on this agenda, but I thought it was supposed to be.
Oh, I
I
thought
must
it was
forget it. Yeah, it was supposed to be for today, so Kelsey, let's put that on for next month. That we want to make sure we hear from you guys on any thoughts. You were going to go to your parent organizations and ask about leadership councils and think about it on your own and give us any feedback as we start to set them up to kind of prepare for a merger or test out the way if we don't merge, we still thought it was a valid idea. So did you have anything else there?
no, that's.
All right.
Were we supposed to hear administrative reports?
Yes. So those are the last things on our new business. So that gives you just a few minutes for administrative reports on the meeting that was supposed to focus on administrative reports. How is that possible? Who would like to go first, folks? Jerry, Mark, and Kelly, who wants? Deb, are you gone?
I will say that,
Do you want to sign these?
I don't know how to say it other than I feel very rushed, I mean, we're all very proud of everything that we're doing in our school. And, we are here to highlight and to tell you all these great things. And now we're kind of rushed for you have 30 seconds, Jerry, to say something about your school that, it's going to leave us a lasting impression before we leave.
Well, but
So,
look at it
I'm sorry,
positively. You get the last word, though, with the good
Do
things.
I really?
Well,
I don't need the last word, it's just that, so, it's just, yeah. So, in my 30 seconds,
you can take more than 30, because we don't have to leave. I mean, I'm going to see if the chorus is first.
we have new families. I think we were all on all of our reports, you'll see that we have received a lot of new registrations in the last month or so. I have 5 new students at Oak Grove. Our student after-school programming has started up. We have, our homework club continues, but we have crafts club, we have cooking club, we have on the back page a science club that is for students in K2.
21 people in it.
21 kids in that. We just, we
Science
have
club.
a parent.
Is that the math science?
Excuse me? That's not mad science. No, we have a parent volunteer that he just couldn't say no. It's like, he gets help, but he's like, oh, no, it's okay. I can handle some more. So he's wonderful. So we're really excited about how well that's going. Just some of our different events. Our Curriculum Night and Harvest Dinner is our largest fall community family event. It involves, and we can't make it happen without all of our community partners from the Brattleboro Food Co-op, Food Connects, our Farm to School Committee help, and Cafe Services all help to put, and our kids, of course, in our local garden, help to put the Harvest Dinner together. And then part of our curriculum night, we also had community partners, River Valley Credit Union, VSAC, Everyone's Books helped to put together our PTO book fair, and Brooks Memorial Library. They all had little booths set up around the school so that families could come through and open up a savings account with River Valley Credit Union, learn about savings plans for college for their kiddos. We use Title I funds to give a coupon to every student. That's 145 of our kiddos all walked out with a book in their hand. So from our book fair.
Wait, how did you fund that?
through Title I,
Oh,
through
yeah.
our Title I monies.
That's great.
Yeah. So it's a lot of work. It's wonderful. It's not a huge fundraiser for our PTO, but we love the fact that it's coordinated with everyone's books, and they do an amazing job giving us great titles, and those books that are under $5, so that we can continue to offer the coupon. It's a $5 coupon per student, but still, they walk out with some sort of a little book. No stickers, no pencils, no other kind of things, just good old books.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we had a good night. Really, it's a really excellent event. And then for Halloween, we had Lyle joined us for lunch. We have our Halloween Mix It Up Day, so we celebrate Mix It Up, where kids are sitting at different tables. Our student leadership helps to organize that and help kids give table conversation starters and join in the whole Mix It Up thing. And so we tried to downplay Halloween a little bit, just try to keep it, kids all knew that it was Halloween, but we gave them more of a focus around Mix It Up and talking and meeting other kids in our small school, but still having an opportunity to do that. And there you go. So thank you. Our next PTO meeting is scheduled for the 14th, and I think Jill's attending the
Yes.
something for winter sports, right?
Yes, so I've written just in a quick announcement that all of the Brattleboro School Endowment is giving to each of the town schools again, so we're going to go to each of the schools and present them. But is there another school function? You're the one school I haven't gotten to something yet. Oh, no, I went to breakfast with you.
We did breakfast with you. We have another breakfast coming up next Friday. Next Friday morning is our family breakfast, the 16th.
And a movie night.
Well, no, it's movie celebration during the day, so
Oh.
2 o'clock. We'd like to come for a little Chex Mix and movie. It's like our PBIS, our school-wide celebrations.
Oh.
So kids earn their Grovies, so they have an opportunity to earn. When they earn their Grovies, they have that's what we call their little chips. I think Green Street, you guys do Greenies, right? Yeah, we have Grovies, they have Greenies, but so kids can earn them individually and cash them in for a variety of things. Classrooms that have classroom celebrations when they get to a certain level, and then we have school-wide celebrations. So, Mark?
Below the statistics, I'll start in on student programming. Our after-school program continues to thrive. During our fall session, we have 141 kids accessing the program anywhere between 1 and 3 times per week. So proud of that figure. It's very impressive to keep kids until close to 4:15 engaged in a variety of activities ranging many different themes. And we will touch upon that in our school-based presentation on the 19th. Winter sports registrations have been coming in. Our PTO has really done a phenomenal job getting that out and organized and reaching out to different community partners who are going to work with us on those days. So that's exciting. We had a PTO meeting last night. It was 3 hours long, but it was all positive and focused on ideas for supporting the school. And one of the new ideas that we have come up with for this year is traditionally we've done a tag sale in the fall. PTO wanted to try something different this year. So we're hosting a holiday craft and vendor fair. I'll send around a couple of flyers so you can see.
It's Saturday, yeah?
That's November 17th,
Oh, that's
Saturday,
next Saturday.
9 to 3. It's going to be a big event. We have over 40 crafters, local crafters who've signed up. So we'll have folks set up in the gymnasium, in the library, and then the hallways of both the first and second floor. So that's been a lot of work.
Did you charge people to come?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did I see, are you guys having something like this as well?
So it's new. We're
Lots
excited.
of
There's
shopping to
gonna
do. Lots of shopping to do.
There'll be plenty of food, there'll be music, nice atmosphere if you want to swing by, get some holiday shopping done, and support local crafters. That would be great. As Jerry talked about, we have also done Mix It Up Day in grades 3 and 4 on November 1st. I think I'll jump to the next side of the paper. You can see we've had a number of events at the school to start the school year. It seems like almost every week we've had, to start the year, we've had a specific event inviting families in to the building. So it's been a really nice way to start the year. We've had 2 community breakfasts. Our open house barbecue was a huge hit. We ended that night with a picnic on the front lawn, which is very sweet. We tried to make a focus of getting our social media presence out there as part of open house. So we handed out these little cards at open house. And essentially, if you have a smartphone, and send a couple around, if you have a smartphone and you turn your camera on the smartphone and focus it on that icon where it says scan me, you'll get the option to follow us on our website, our Facebook page, our Instagram account, and our Twitter account. So that little kind of promo open house led to some more visitors on those social media sites. And I'm really proud of those sites because they're almost posted to daily. And Miss Shannon, our librarian, has really taken that on.
It doesn't work. What do I have to do?
Take a picture.
I did.
I don't think you take a picture, you just focus on
You have
it.
to have a scanner app.
Okay.
There's another piece. So I didn't think you could just take a picture. It would
You
suddenly
can follow us.
I always wondered how to use those.
I know, I've never used to do that.
Yeah.
That I'm sure everything's a free app, basically. But
And you can follow us just by following our website. You can see
You
all
can
of
just
those
look it up on
sites,
the
right?
computer too.
But I think if you look at those,
Yes.
you get a really nice sense of
We're
the
on
story of the
40,
school
so.
year. Other nights, we've had a literacy night, we've had a spooky story night, and parent-teacher conferences for all 3 schools are coming up Thursday and Friday of this week. On October 23rd, the Wyndham Regional Commission organized a tour with the Commissioner of the Vermont Public Service, Judy Tierney, and the Secretary of Education, Dan French, who were scheduled to visit us at Green Street, spend the morning with us, get a tour of the wood pellet boiler. So that was kind of nice to show off that huge investment made towards the school. Dan French got called away, so he wasn't able to join us, unfortunately. But Commissioner Tierney was very impressed with the project and is advocating for more projects like that around Vermont. Let's see, this, I think I've handed this out before, but this is a handout from the Wyndham Wood Heat Commission that details the work and the scope of the project. That's it.
I think I've seen this one.
Yeah, I think I handed it out last spring.
All right, Kelly and John.
Today I do have a resignation.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead with this.
Okay. So it's just an email from Veronica Sampson to myself and Lyle and Maurice and Duncan Holly, who's the special ed administrator. Veronica started the year on a leave of absence, and on the conclusion of that leave has decided not to come back. So there's a couple.
So we need a motion to accept Veronica Simpson's Resignation.
I move that we accept the resignation of Veronica Sampson.
Second, please. Spoon?
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And what position was it?
Special educator.
So do we have another person in there because it was already a long-term leave?
We do. So Gail Staley came out of
Oh.
retirement and was happy enough to jump on board again, and she's been working as a special educator, which has been terrific. And then now we also have an ad out because it's official that Veronica has decided to resign.
So, I'm sorry, I misunderstood this. For some reason, I thought that all of the special educators were employed by the SU.
There.
But she has to resign to you also because she was at your site.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think technically we don't have to accept her resignation. But that's one of those things that isn't very clear yet. I'm almost getting this to work. We're working forward out of it. Now it's making me install something else.
You can just also just go on Instagram,
I know.
search Green Street School and follow them.
You should just be able to open up your camera and scan over it, and it'll come up the top QR code detected, and if you click on that, that's what'll bring you to, that will bring you to all of the links.
Go to the
So it won't
camera.
like vibrate or take a picture or anything, it'll just bring up something at the top, a banner to click on.
If it recognizes what that is, then it should just know to invite you to
You don't have to
scan
take a
it.
picture, just hold your camera over it until the banner comes up on the top.
Well, let's hear from Kelly. Figure this out
You can do
later.
it after.
All right. Something that
Sorry.
that I looked at a little more closely after we had our diversity conversation was the percentages of the breakdown of our reported races. And I just want to point out that our multiracial, people who report as multiracial is 10%, just black is 1%. And I agree with your statement that we have a lot of multiracial families, and it makes sense to me that those multiracial couples are then producing, you know, if one identifies as white and one identifies as another race, and then they have a child, and that's a multiracial child, I think that could be why our percentages are higher for kids. But anyway, that's sort of just came to me as I looked at this. I think all of us agree that the enrollments we've had have been really significant in terms of special ed needs and a lot of kids who are homeless. It's something we've been working on and talking about a lot with our counseling staff. And we're sort of saving for town meeting those numbers specifically because we don't want to identify, but it's something that stands out
Is
every
it
time.
same
I
to
do
same
this.
behavioral stresses as well?
Yes.
Is it
Yeah.
going up, the homeless numbers during the year?
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is the time of year when it gets, you know, we're scrambling to get families housing because they're sleeping in tents and it's cold out and you have to have a really low temperature to get a hotel voucher, things like that. So that's 20 degrees.
20?
Our social workers
Wow.
spend a lot of time talking to our homeless liaison about that and among other things. So we're still at 24% as a sort of a caseload between our HCRS and our social worker.
This is a new field, isn't it? Not everybody's telling us this health
I
office
think that was
visit?
probably motivated by the executive session that we had, tracking all
We
of
all
that.
added that, and then this is the first month that I added, I had emailed Nurse Amy how many visits per day, and she gave me the breakdown, and I left it on because I sort of sat there and said, oh my God.
No, it is.
It's just, I mean, you see her running around, and then you see this, and this is why. So among other things, 234 kids a month are dropping in for various needs. She's doing vision screenings, hearing screenings. She's giving out medication. She's toileting. She's consulting with diabetic students.
132 toileting assists.
It's a significant problem in our schools. The kids are coming in not toilet trained, and it's an ongoing issue up through several grades.
All of you say the same thing?
So it's, it's just this, what she wrote, and this is just her daily life, and she probably didn't think much of it, but when I saw those numbers, I just wanted to share because I felt like it's really an example of what our
What's a
needs are.
head check for lice?
lice.
Yes.
Not concussion, what's a concussion?
That's still a lot of lice checking.
Yeah. So about 59 a day.
And-
We had, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, were you able to hire someone for that additional position?
Actually just got an email saying yes when I
Oh.
got here tonight.
Oh.
So at the next meeting, I'll give you
Great.
their name and all their info, but yeah, we're excited about it. And I think that'll help a lot.
Yeah, that'll help with those
Believe
59
me,
visits
nursing
shared
needs
between
work well.
2 people at least.
We had 2 students move in from out of district and 1 move out of district from our school. We had several come in September. We have a couple more that have just started in November. Our first session has ended of after-school programming. That was pretty successful. We have some ideas to expand it in the winter. One thing that's coming up is our World Drumming program, which Bree Davenport did, is going to perform at the Diversity Showcase as their culminating event, so they're pretty excited about that. Just don't want to miss anything. Oh, we had all of our family breakfasts in October. They were great, well attended. We do 3 separate breakfasts. We've tried to collaborate a lot with the West Pratt Fire Station. Their proximity to us lends itself nicely. They're our adopt-a-school station. We each have a station. So they're in contact monthly to come visit as well as hosting our classes, which is really great. We also, it's not listed here because we said it was upcoming last month, but we did our first trunk or treat on the 26th, which was a really nice event. Our parent group ACT put that on, and we'd like to make it an annual thing. It's a pretty neat idea to have kids trick or treat just in a parking lot, and it's contained and it's safe and it's lit well. They did a bake sale, so that was a really nice time. And then we had our annual pumpkin contest on Halloween, which was awesome. We had some community people come in to be judges, and they donated some cash prizes for the classrooms so they can buy something to use in their classrooms. So that was great. And the office display is still up if you want to come see it. And we brought 3 kids, Andrew Spino and I brought 3 kids last Friday to Price Chopper, and we went live on WTSA to talk about Project Feed, which all of our schools are kicking off pretty soon. Facility-wise, we have 2 things outside. John, do you want to talk about the kindergarten structure?
Sure. So a number of our classes, primarily kindergarten, but some of our older grade classes are accessing the forest area out behind Academy School that the landowner generously offers for our use. Beautiful forested area that is expanding every year. One of our kindergarten classes in particular spends, I would say, roughly 25% of their week out in the woods. We have all this equipment for kids, and she's really developed a beautiful forest program. With that, she secured, I believe it was 1% fund to purchase a 3-sided structure to build out in the forest area. So I spent an afternoon with a group of 6th graders, sort of prepping the site, leveling, piers, and we had a parent volunteer coming in to build the structure. It was mid-construction right now. It's an 8x12 sort of lean-to-ish structure to allow this classes to access that space regardless of weather. It's a nice additional feature.
I also have a diversity highlight. I just want to say that happened yesterday at All Schools Sing, and I didn't even know about it until it was happening. because that's sort of what happens at our school. It organically comes out through content work with our teachers. But some 6th graders read poetry at All Schools Sing, and they were just because poems. So it was all about breaking down the walls of stereotypes, and it was just because I'm a girl, this, or just because I'm Scottish, or, you know, so it was really amazing. They really put themselves out there. Some of the things they said were incredible, and a lot of the kids who read have struggled with reading fluency and have maybe speech issues, and so it's just a really beautiful thing to see. And it sort of got me thinking about maybe having some staff do it too. All School Sings become sort of a forum for me to read a quick book, or we talk about something each time, to weave in just one component of diversity or tolerance, or, you know, whatever's going on. And we have a lot to choose from these days, so it's just a highlight that came up as you were asking about those things. I thought, well, yes, it does. It happens every day. I see it. So it's really nice. And my last thing is I have to give our kitchen staff a huge shout out, and that includes all 3 schools because all the food comes out of our kitchen. But today we were short-staffed due to a couple of absences, so I spent a few hours in the kitchen every night. It was really good for me to do that. I got to walk in their shoes, and I got to prep after school meals. So your kids ate meals that I prepped, which is really kind of cool. And I got to give them their fruit on their tray, and I got to see every kid, and it's really phenomenal what comes out of that kitchen every day. There's so many options. They work so hard, and then it goes to all 3 schools, and they're just, yeah, I was really impressed. Just want to say.
Since you mentioned Kevin, they are down 3, I think at least 3, maybe 4 workers. So I even asked Allie West, who's the cafe service director, to give me something, and I'll put it in our newsletter.
I noticed actually when I was in the bathroom that it was in your newsletter too, that they were hiring people for the
because so people that are normally cooking here, we're covering because both of your chefs, if you will, were at Oak Grove today. So thank you, Kelly, for because I was supposed to do it on my end, but I guess you did it. So.
You could add another little cafe service wrinkle as well that I personally appreciated. For however long Green Street School that I know of has been here, lunch service takes place right in the front hallway. So literally for 2 hours of the day, you have a line of kids coming down through the front hallway to get their lunch to take to the classrooms. It's distracting. So I've been thinking about that for a while now. Started doing some research, and we purchased 2 carts where the door closes. And essentially now, when cafe services get here, they load up the trays then go onto the cart, and they're delivering the lunches to the classrooms. Significantly more work for them to do. And they've taken on the challenge with smiles and have embraced it, and it's been a really nice change in the school.
They work really hard to keep us happy, really. They're really receptive to what we think will work. And they have great ideas.
So I really do have to go because the band's going to only play for like 10 minutes, and I'm going to miss all of it, I think. So I guess I leave you guys to
Should we
hit for
adjourn the meeting?
agendas. If there's anything else for Kelsey to pass over for the minutes, and then adjourning, I think we're at. Thank you all.
I don't know anything else for the agenda.
I don't even have an agenda. No, I can't.
I thought you meant for the next agenda.
Oh.
Is that what we're talking about here?
I need to follow up on the diversity.
I think we're going to talk about that, and she'll put it on the January.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I don't.
All right, well then I move that we adjourn the meeting. All in favor? All right, 7:09.